Dr. Kesetai pressed her three-fingered hand against the observation window of Harmony's light research station. The view outside showed a beautiful nebula painted in purple and gold colors. Her large, gentle eyes reflected the distant stars as she watched her team's latest discovery growing in the lab. The Villani scientist had spent 12 cycles studying the quantum reactive flowers that only grew in this remote corner of space. These strange plants could bend light around themselves, making them nearly invisible. Her people, the Villani, believed that studying these flowers might help them understand how space itself worked. Dr. Kesetai called Nethwa one of her younger researchers. His voice carried the soft, musical tone that all Villani shared. The samples from Sector 7 are showing unusual energy patterns. Kesetai turned from the window, her flowing robes making a gentle swishing sound. Like all Villani, she stood nearly 8 feet tall but moved with the grace of a dancer. Her people had evolved from plant-eating creatures on a peaceful world where violence was unknown. "Show me," she said, walking to the main laboratory. The research station Harmony's light was small but comfortable. It housed only 15 Villani scientists, all dedicated to peaceful research. They had no weapons, no shields, and no military training. The idea of violence was so foreign to them that they had not even considered the need for protection. Nethwa led her to a containment field where a single flower floated in zero gravity. The plant seemed to shimmer, bending the light around it in impossible ways. As they watched, the flower suddenly became completely invisible for 3 seconds before reappearing. "Remarkable," Kestai whispered. "The quantum field is stronger than we thought. This could change everything we know about space travel." She was about to begin a detailed scan when the station's proximity alarms began blaring. The sound was harsh and frightening, something the peaceful Villani had never heard before. "What is that noise?" Nethwa asked, his large eyes wide with confusion. Kesetai rushed to the communications console. On the main screen, she saw something that made her blood run cold. 12 massive warships had appeared from hyperspace, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. She had never seen military vessels before, but she instinctively knew these ships meant trouble. The largest ship was 3 times the size of their research station. Its hull was black as space itself, covered in armor plating and weapon ports. Strange symbols were painted on its sides in blood-red colors. "Unknown station," a harsh voice crackled through their communications. "You will prepare for boarding. Resistance will result in termination." Kesetai's hands shook as she tried to understand what was happening. "This is Dr. Kestai of the research station Harmony's Light. We are peaceful scientists conducting botanical research. We have no weapons or military value," a new voice answered, deeper and more threatening. "I am General Sekthar of the Korthvi hegemony. You will surrender your research data and submit to questioning. Your compliance is not optional." The Korthvi. Kesetai had heard whispers about them in the outer colonies. They were a race of reptilian warriors who believed that strength was the only thing that mattered. They conquered weaker species and took whatever they wanted. "Please," Kestai said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We are under the protection of the Galactic Council. Our research is for the benefit of all peaceful species." General Sekthar's laugh was like the sound of breaking glass. "The Galactic Council is weak. Their protection means nothing here. Prepare for boarding." The first Korthvi shuttle attached to their docking bay with a loud crash that shook the entire station. Kesetai could hear her team crying in fear from other parts of the station. None of them had ever experienced violence or aggression. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridors as the Korthvi soldiers spread through the station. They were tall, muscular creatures covered in dark scales. Their eyes glowed red in the dim lighting, and their mouths were full of sharp teeth. Each one carried weapons that looked capable of destroying walls. General Sekthar entered the main lab wearing black armor covered in battle scars. He was larger than his soldiers, with scars across his face that spoke of many fights. When he saw the quantum reactive flowers, his eyes lit up with interest. "Interesting," he hissed, his forked tongue flicking out. "Plants that can bend light. These could be useful for military applications?" "No," Kesetai said, stepping forward despite her fear. "These plants are for peaceful research only. We study them to understand the universe, not to make weapons." Sekthar backhanded her across the face, sending her flying into a wall. The blow would have killed a human, but the Villani were surprisingly tough despite their peaceful nature. "You will tell us everything about these plants," he growled. "How they work, how to grow them, how to use them for camouflage technology. You will also provide all research data on quantum manipulation." Kestai tasted blood in her mouth but forced herself to stand. I will not help you turn our research into weapons. Then your team will suffer, Sekthar said simply. He gestured to his soldiers who dragged in young Nethwa. The researcher was trembling with terror, his usually bright eyes dim with fear. Doctor, Nethwa whispered. What do they want with us? Sekthar placed one clawed hand on Nethwa's shoulder. For every hour you refuse to cooperate, one of your team dies. We start with the youngest. Kestai felt her world crashing down around her. She had dedicated her life to peaceful research, to making the universe a better place. Now these monsters wanted to turn her work into tools of war and destruction. I need time to think, she said quietly. You have 10 minutes, Sekthar replied. My soldiers will begin setting up equipment to extract information from your computers. Whether you help or not, we will get what we came for. As the Korthvi soldiers began dismantling their equipment, Kestai made her way to the communications room. Her heart was breaking as she watched years of careful research being destroyed by these brutal invaders. She managed to reach the emergency transmitter before a soldier noticed her. Her fingers flew over the controls, sending out a simple distress signal on all frequencies. This is Dr. Kestai of Research Station Harmony's Light, she whispered into the transmitter. We are under attack by Korthvi forces. They are forcing us to weaponize our research. We need immediate assistance. Coordinates follow. A Korthvi soldier spotted her and raised his weapon. The energy blast destroyed the transmitter and threw Kestai across the room. Her message had lasted only 15 seconds, but it was transmitted on emergency frequencies that reached across the galaxy. As she lay on the floor, watching her peaceful world being destroyed, Kestai could only hope that someone, somewhere, had heard their call for help. The Galactic Council would debate for weeks before taking action, but maybe someone else would respond faster. She had no idea that her simple message had reached a species known throughout the galaxy as the most dangerous predators ever to achieve spaceflight. She had never heard the whispered stories about Deathworlders who could cross the galaxy in days instead of weeks. She had never heard of humanity. Admiral Sarah Morrison was reviewing fleet reports when the priority message arrived at Earth Command. The communication came through the Galactic Council's emergency network, but it had been forwarded by Ambassador Chen with a simple note attached. Peaceful researchers under attack, requesting immediate assistance. Morrison read aloud to her staff. The message included coordinates and a brief recording of Dr. Kesatai's distress call. Colonel James Park, her second in command, leaned over the tactical display. It's pretty far out, Admiral. Edge of mapped space. The Council shows this as a Korthvi operation. Morrison's jaw tightened. She had dealt with the Korthvi before during border disputes. They were bullies who picked on weaker species, but they usually avoided direct confrontation with anyone who could fight back. How long would it take to get a diplomatic mission there? She asked. Standard Council response? 3 weeks minimum, Park replied. They'll want to debate, form committees, draft formal protests. And how long for these researchers to be dead or enslaved? Probably 3 days, Admiral. Morrison stood up from her chair and walked to the large display showing human fleet positions. The Third Fleet was currently on training exercises near Jupiter, with 200 ships and 30,000 personnel. Send a message to Captain Rodriguez, she ordered. I want the entire Third Fleet ready for hyperspace jump in 6 hours. Her staff exchanged glances. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, the communications officer, spoke up carefully. Admiral, shouldn't we contact the Council first? Get approval for military action? Morrison turned to face her team. At 55, she had gray streaks in her black hair and scars on her hands from her early days as a Marine. She had fought pirates, rebels, and alien raiders across human space. 15 peaceful scientists are being tortured right now, she said quietly. By the time the Council finishes talking, they'll all be dead. We leave in 6 hours. The room fell silent. Everyone knew that tone. Admiral Morrison had made her decision and nothing would change her mind. Meanwhile, on Harmony's Light, General Sekthar was growing frustrated. The Vallani scientists were more stubborn than he had expected. Despite threats and violence, they refused to explain how their quantum flowers worked. Dr. Kestai sat in a small holding cell, her face bruised from repeated beatings. Through the transparent walls, she could see her team being forced to work at gunpoint. The Korthvi had brought their own scientists, ugly creatures who cared nothing for the delicate research that had taken years to develop. The quantum field generators are too complex, one of the Korthvi scientists reported to Sekthar. We need the original researchers to explain the process. Sekthar's red eyes glowed with anger. Then make them talk. We have tried pain, General. These plant eaters are surprisingly tough. Perhaps we should try a different approach. The general thought for a moment, then smiled with his mouth full of sharp teeth. Bring me the youngest one, the one called Nethwa. Minutes later, Korthvi soldiers dragged the young Villani researcher into the main lab. Nethwa was barely out of his studies, still excited about his first real research assignment. Now his large eyes were filled with terror. Dr. Kesetai can see us from her cell, Sekthar announced loudly. Watch, Plant Eater, as I demonstrate what happens to those who defy the hegemony. He drew a curved blade and held it to Nethwa's throat. The young researcher began to shake, but he did not beg or cry out. From her cell, Kesetai pressed her hands against the transparent wall. Stop. I'll tell you what you want to know. Too late, Sekthar hissed. You had your chance. But before he could hurt Nethwa, alarms began blaring throughout the station. A Korthvi officer rushed into the room, his scales pale with fear. General, ships approaching from hyperspace. Many ships. Sekthar pushed Nethwa aside and activated the main display. What he saw made his blood run cold. Dozens of vessels were dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. They moved with precision that made his own fleet look clumsy. The ships were unlike anything he had seen before. They were smaller than Korthvi warships but seemed to radiate menace. Their hulls were painted in gray and blue, with strange symbols that he did not recognize. Incoming transmission, his communications officer reported. Put it on screen, Sekthar ordered. A human face appeared on the display. It belonged to a female with short gray hair and cold blue eyes. She wore a uniform that was clean and professional, but there was something dangerous about her expression. This is Admiral Sarah Morrison of the Earth Navy 3rd Fleet, she said in a voice like ice. You are currently attacking a peaceful research station. You have exactly 1 hour to release all hostages and withdraw from the system. Sekthar laughed, showing all his sharp teeth. I am General Sekthar of the Korthvi hegemony. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences. We have 12 warships and this system is under our control. The human admiral's expression did not change. General, I have 200 ships and 30,000 Marines who are very angry about what you've done here. This is your only warning. Humans, Sekthar spat. We have studied your species. You are weak creatures from a pathetic world. Your technology is primitive and your soldiers are soft. Admiral Morrison smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. General, you're about to learn why Earth is classified as a Class Deuthine death world. You have 59 minutes. The transmission ended, leaving Sekthar staring at a blank screen. He had heard rumors about humans, but most species dismissed them as exaggerated stories. Earth was supposed to be impossibly hostile, covered in poison gas and extreme weather, but surely no species could actually evolve in such conditions. Prepare for battle, he ordered his fleet. These soft humans will learn what real warriors can do. His confidence lasted exactly 12 minutes. That was how long it took for the human fleet to demonstrate why they were feared across the galaxy. The attack began without warning. Human ships moved like hunting predators, using the asteroid field and nebula gas to hide their approach. Their weapons hit with surgical precision, targeting engines and weapon systems rather than trying to destroy ships outright. Within minutes, half of Sekthar's fleet was crippled and drifting. The humans fought like nothing he had ever seen before. Where Korthvi tactics were brutal and direct, human warfare was smart and deadly. How are they moving so fast? His tactical officer shouted over the alarms. Their ships are too small to carry that much firepower, another officer added, but the humans kept coming. They used coordinated attacks that seemed to predict every Korthvi move. It was like fighting an entire pack of predators instead of individual ships. General Sekthar realized with growing horror that everything his people believed about humans was wrong. These were not weak creatures from a soft world. These were apex predators who had somehow learned to travel between stars, and they were very, very angry. The human fleet hung in space like a pack of metal wolves surrounding their prey. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of her flagship Retribution, watching the tactical display as her ships moved into perfect attack positions. Status report, she ordered. 6 Korthvi ships disabled. Admiral, Captain Rodriguez reported from the tactical station. No human casualties. Their remaining ships are trying to form a defensive line around the research station. Morrison nodded. The first phase had gone exactly as planned. Human ships had used the nebula and asteroid field to approach unseen, then struck with the precision that came from millions of years of predator evolution. "They're using the research station as a shield," Colonel Park observed. "Typical Korthvi tactics. Hide behind civilians." "Not for long," Morrison replied coldly. "Signal the marine transports. Prepare for boarding action." On Harmony's Light, General Sekthar was discovering that his reputation as a master tactician meant nothing against human warfare. His ships were being picked apart by an enemy that fought like no species he had ever encountered. "They're not fighting like civilized beings," his tactical officer complained. "They use deception, misdirection, psychological warfare. They fight like animals," another officer added. Sekthar's red eyes glowed with frustrated rage. The Korthvi way of war was direct and brutal. They overwhelmed enemies with superior firepower and intimidation. But these humans fought like hunters stalking prey. "General," his communications officer called out, "the human admiral is requesting another transmission." "Put her on screen," Sekthar snarled. Admiral Morrison's face appeared again, but this time she was not alone. Behind her stood dozens of human soldiers in black armor that looked designed for close combat. They held weapons that seemed both advanced and practical. "Your hour is up, General," Morrison said calmly. "You have 30 seconds to begin releasing hostages or we board your ships." "You wouldn't dare attack while we hold the research station," Sekthar replied. "Your own people would be caught in the crossfire." Morrison's smile was as cold as space itself. "General, you clearly don't understand humans very well. We don't leave our people behind. Ever." The transmission ended, and immediately Sekthar saw something that made his scales turn pale. Small fast ships were launching from the human fleet. They moved toward the research station with incredible speed, weaving between his defensive fire like they were dancing. "Stop them," he ordered. "Destroy those transports." But the human assault shuttles were too fast and too well protected. They used electronic warfare to confuse targeting systems and deployed clouds of metal chaff to block sensors. Most importantly, they moved in coordinated groups that supported each other. The first shuttle attached to the research station's docking bay with a sound like thunder. Sekthar could hear cutting tools working through the hull as human marines prepared to board. Dr. Kestai watched from her cell as the humans began their assault. She had never seen soldiers before, but she could tell these humans were different from the Korthvi. They moved with purpose rather than brutality, precision rather than rage. The cell block doors exploded inward in a shower of sparks and smoke. Through the chaos, Kestai saw armored figures moving with impossible speed and coordination. They seemed to know exactly where every Korthvi soldier was positioned. "Contact. 3 hostiles in the north corridor," one human shouted. "Roger that, Alpha Team. Beta Team, sweep south. Gamma Team, secure the civilians." The voices were calm and professional, nothing like the angry shouts of Korthvi warriors. These humans fought like they had been born for it, but they did not seem to enjoy the violence. A Korthvi soldier appeared at the end of Kestai's corridor, his weapon raised toward the human marines. Before he could fire, 3 humans appeared from different directions and neutralized him with stunning efficiency. One of the marines approached Kestai's cell. Through his helmet visor, she could see kind eyes and a face marked by battle scars. "Dr. Kestai?" he asked in accented but clear Galactic Standard. "I'm Sergeant Martinez, Earth Marines. We're here to get you out." The cell door disappeared in a controlled explosion that somehow did not harm anyone inside. Kestai stared at the human soldier in amazement. He was shorter than a Villani but seemed to radiate confidence and strength. "How did you know my name?" she asked. "We got your message," Martinez replied. "Admiral Morrison doesn't like it when scientists get hurt." As they moved through the corridors, Kestai saw human marines working with incredible efficiency to rescue her team. They had somehow mapped the entire station and knew exactly where each researcher was being held. "Behind you," Nethwa shouted from across the room. A Korthvi soldier had appeared from a hidden position, his weapon aimed at Sergeant Martinez. But the Marine had already sensed the threat. He spun and fired in one smooth motion, disabling the attacker without killing him. "Thanks for the warning," Martinez said to Nethwa with a slight smile. "You okay, son?" Nethwa nodded, too amazed to speak. These humans fought like predators but treated civilians with gentle care. It was unlike anything he had expected. Throughout the station, the pattern repeated. Human marines moved through the corridors like ghosts, appearing wherever they were needed. They used tactics that the Korthvi could not understand or counter. They're everywhere, a Korthvi officer reported to Sekthar. They seem to know our positions before we take them. How many of them are there? Sekthar demanded. We don't know. They move so fast, use so much misdirection. It could be 50 or 500. The truth was that only 40 human Marines had boarded the station. But they fought with the coordination of a single organism, sharing information instantly and supporting each other perfectly. In the main laboratory, human Marines carefully secured the quantum reactive flowers and research data. They handled everything with the same precision they used in combat. Make sure nothing gets damaged, the team leader ordered. The Admiral wants this research protected, Dr. Kessitai watched in amazement as human soldiers, who had been fighting deadly battles minutes before now, handled her delicate experiments with extreme care. General Sekthar made his last desperate play. He grabbed Nethwa as a hostage and retreated to the station's central hub, his weapon pressed to the young researcher's head. Stay back, he shouted as human Marines surrounded him. I'll kill him. Sergeant Martinez stepped forward, his weapon lowered. General, you don't want to do that. I am Korthvi, Sekthar screamed. We do not surrender. No one's asking you to surrender, Martinez said calmly. Just let the kid go. This is between warriors. For a moment, Sekthar considered the offer. These humans fought with honor, even though they were clearly superior fighters. But his pride would not let him back down. Your admiral thinks she has won, he hissed. But I still control this station. I could destroy it and everyone on it. Martinez smiled, and suddenly Sekthar realized he had made a terrible mistake. The human Marine had been moving closer while talking, and now he was within striking distance. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Martinez disarmed Sekthar, freed Nethwa, and had the Korthvi general on the ground before anyone could blink. Like I said, Martinez commented as he secured the prisoner. This is between warriors. The rescue of Harmony's light became a legend that spread across the galaxy within days. Admiral Morrison's fleet had accomplished in hours what most military forces could not do in weeks. Dr. Kessitai found herself aboard the human flagship Retribution, receiving medical treatment in the ship's advanced medical bay. The human doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, examined her injuries with gentle hands. The bruising will heal completely, Dr. Chen assured her. Humans and Villani have surprisingly similar healing processes. Kestai looked around the medical bay in wonder. Everything was clean and efficient, but also somehow warm and welcoming. Human crew members moved through the corridors with purpose, but they always had time to offer a friendly greeting to the rescued researchers. I don't understand, Kessitai said to Dr. Chen. Your people fight like predators, but you treat us with such kindness. Dr. Chen smiled as she sealed a healing patch over one of Kestai's cuts. That's what makes humans different, Dr. Kestai. We fight to protect, not to conquer. On the bridge, Admiral Morrison was coordinating the final phases of the operation. Her fleet had completely destroyed or captured the Korthvi ships, but she wanted to make sure no other hostile forces were in the area. Long-range sensors show 3 more Korthvi fleets approaching, Captain Rodriguez reported. They'll arrive in approximately 6 hours. Morrison studied the tactical display. The approaching fleets were much larger than the first one, with over 40 ships total. Most military commanders would consider withdrawing to avoid a larger battle. Signal the fleet, Morrison ordered. We're staying. Colonel Park looked surprised. Admiral, those are overwhelming odds. Even for us. Morrison turned to face her bridge crew. Those scientists didn't ask for our help because they thought we were safe. They asked because they needed protection. We don't abandon people who trust us. The crew nodded with understanding. This was the human way. When someone needed help, you helped them. When someone threatened innocence, you stopped them. It was simple and absolute. 6 hours later, the Korthvi reinforcements arrived expecting to find their advance fleet victorious. Instead, they found the wreckage of 12 warships and a human fleet waiting for them. Admiral Gorthak commanded the lead Korthvi fleet. He was older and more experienced than General Sekthar, with scars from dozens of battles. When he saw the human ships, he immediately tried to establish communication. Human Admiral, his voice came across the communication channel. I am Admiral Gorthak. You have interfered in hegemony business. Withdraw now and we will not pursue vengeance. Morrison's response was broadcast on all frequencies. Admiral Gorthak, I am Admiral Sarah Morrison. You have attacked peaceful researchers under my protection. Withdraw now or face the consequences. Gorthek studied the human fleet through his ship's sensors. They had fewer ships than his combined force, but the wreckage around them suggested they were dangerous opponents. Your ships are outnumbered 3-1, he pointed out. Surely you cannot hope to win against such odds. Admiral, Morrison replied calmly, you're about to learn why humans don't worry about odds. The second battle was different from the first. The Korthvi came prepared for human tactics, with overlapping fields of fire and coordinated movements. But they still had no real understanding of what they faced. Human warfare was not just about superior technology or better training. It was about thinking like a predator species that had climbed to the top of one of the most dangerous food chains in the galaxy. The human fleet split into small groups that moved independently but supported each other perfectly. They used the debris from the first battle as cover, turning the wreckage into improvised weapons and shields. They're using our own ships against us, a Korthvi tactical officer reported in shock. Admiral Gorthek watched in growing horror as human ships maneuvered through the battle space like living creatures. They seemed to anticipate every Korthvi move and respond with devastating effectiveness. How do they coordinate so well? He demanded. Our intelligence report said human technology was primitive. The truth was that human technology was different, not primitive. Where other species developed tools to overcome their peaceful natures, humans developed tools to enhance their predatory instincts. Human ships shared information instantly, creating a collective awareness that allowed them to fight as a single organism. Their weapons were designed for precision rather than raw power, allowing them to disable enemies rather than simply destroying them. Most importantly, human tactics reflected millions of years of hunting experience. They knew how to separate prey from the herd, how to use terrain to their advantage, and how to strike at exactly the right moment for maximum effect. Dr. Kesetai watched the battle from the Retribution's observation deck, accompanied by Sergeant Martinez, who had been assigned as her liaison. Why don't your ships just destroy the Korthvi fleet? She asked. You clearly have the ability. Martinez considered the question carefully. We could, he admitted. But Admiral Morrison doesn't believe in unnecessary killing. The goal is to stop the threat, not to commit genocide. But they tried to enslave us, Kesetai pointed out. They would have turned our research into weapons. That's why we're stopping them, Martinez replied. But once they're stopped, the killing stops too. That's what separates us from species like the Korthvi. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the combined Korthvi fleets had been completely neutralized. Some ships were destroyed, but most were simply disabled and drifting. The human fleet had suffered only minor damage. Admiral Gorthak found himself a prisoner aboard a human ship, his entire command either destroyed or captured. He sat in a comfortable cell trying to understand how his superior force had been defeated so completely. A human officer entered his cell. It was Admiral Morrison herself, carrying a simple chair which she placed across from his bench. Admiral Gorthak, she said politely, I wanted to speak with you before we transfer you to council custody. Gorthak looked at the human admiral with a mixture of respect and confusion. You defeated my entire fleet. Why do you not simply execute me? Morrison seemed genuinely surprised by the question. Why would I execute you? The battle is over. I am your enemy, Gorthak pointed out. I came here to destroy you and retake this system. You came here following orders, Morrison corrected. And now you're a prisoner of war. Prisoners have rights, even enemy prisoners. Gorthak stared at her for a long moment. Your species is truly strange. You fight like demons but show mercy like saints. Morrison smiled slightly. Admiral, we fight like humans. Everything else follows from that. The news of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. 3 Korthvi fleets defeated by a single human force. Peaceful researchers rescued without a single civilian casualty. An entire star system secured in less than 12 hours. The Galactic Council, which was still debating how to respond to the original distress call, suddenly found themselves facing a completely new situation. Humanity, the species they had dismissed as minor players in galactic politics, had just demonstrated military capabilities that shocked everyone. More importantly, they had demonstrated the will to use those capabilities to protect innocents, regardless of the odds or the risk to themselves. Dr. Kesetai's simple distress call had awakened something that the galaxy had never seen before. a species of apex predators who chose to be protectors. 3 months after the rescue of Harmony's light, the galaxy was a different place. The story of Admiral Morrison's fleet had spread to every civilized world, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees who had heard the tale secondhand. Dr. Kessetai stood in her rebuilt laboratory, watching new quantum reactive flowers bloom in their containment fields. The research station looked much the same as before, but now it was protected by a small human garrison that had volunteered to stay. The quantum resonance is even stronger than before, Nethwa reported excitedly. The young researcher had recovered from his ordeal and thrown himself back into his work with renewed passion. Perhaps the flowers respond to our emotional state, Kestai suggested. We are certainly more grateful for our work now. Through the laboratory windows, she could see human patrol ships moving through the system on their regular routes. Admiral Morrison had kept her promise that the research station would never again be threatened by hostile forces. The door chimed softly, and Sergeant Martinez entered carrying 2 cups of the earth beverage called coffee. Over the past months, he had become a regular visitor to the laboratory, fascinated by the Villani research. Any exciting discoveries today? He asked, offering 1 cup to Kessetai. She accepted the coffee gratefully. Humans had introduced many wonderful things to the research station, but coffee was definitely her favorite. We're making progress on understanding how the quantum fields interact with consciousness itself. Martinez nodded, though she suspected he only understood half of what she said. Sounds important. It could revolutionize our understanding of reality, Kestai agreed. And before you ask, no, it cannot be turned into a weapon, Martinez laughed. Actually, I was going to ask if it could help with space navigation. Admiral Morrison is always looking for ways to travel faster and safer. This was another thing Kessetai had learned about humans. Despite their fearsome reputation as warriors, they were genuinely curious about science and learning. The human garrison had become unofficial research assistants, always eager to help with experiments. Dr. Kestai, Nethwa called from across the room. We're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. The main display activated, showing the familiar chambers where representatives from hundreds of species gathered to debate galactic policy. Today, however, the mood seemed unusually serious. Councillor Vethron of the Altarian Republic was speaking. The motion before us today concerns the establishment of a new galactic protection force. Given recent events, it has become clear that our current security arrangements are inadequate. Dr. Kessetai watched with interest. Since the Battle of Harmony's Light, the Council had been forced to confront some uncomfortable truths about galactic security. The peaceful species that dominated the Council were excellent at diplomacy and trade, but they were helpless against military aggression. The proposal, Councillor Vethron continued, is to invite the human government to establish permanent protection fleets in key systems throughout Council space. The reaction was immediate and heated. Some species welcomed the idea, having seen what human protection could accomplish. Others worried about giving so much military power to a single species. Councillor Drextu of the Harmony Coalition stood to speak. We have all heard the reports from Harmony's Light. The humans responded to a distress call from complete strangers, crossed the galaxy in hours instead of weeks, and defeated superior forces without harming a single civilian. This is the kind of protection the galaxy needs. But Councillor Yithak of the Traditional Alliance disagreed. Humans are predators from a death world. Yes, they protected the Villani researchers, but what happens when their interests conflict with ours? Can we trust apex predators to always choose protection over conquest? Ambassador Chen, representing humanity on the Council, rose to address the chamber. She was a small woman by human standards, but her presence commanded attention from beings 3 times her size. Honored councillors, she began, humanity did not seek this responsibility. We responded to a distress call because it was the right thing to do. We will continue to respond to such calls whether you formalize our role or not. And therein lies the problem. Councillor Yithak replied. You act without consultation, without regard for proper procedures. How can we trust a species that ignores diplomatic protocol? Ambassador Chen's response was quiet but carried clearly through the chamber. Councillor, when you received Dr. Kessetai's distress call, how long did you debate before taking action? The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. The council had been debating for 3 weeks and still had not reached a decision when news arrived that the crisis was over. 15 innocent scientists would have died while you followed proper procedures. Chen continued. Humanity does not have the luxury of treating suffering as a debate topic. Counselor Drextu spoke again. The motion is not about changing human nature, but about providing a framework for cooperation. The protection force would operate under council oversight, with clear rules and limitations. The debate continued for hours, but Dr. Kesistai stopped watching after the first few speakers. She had seen enough of politics to last several lifetimes. Instead, she walked to the observation deck where several human Marines were sharing lunch with her research team. The sight still amazed her. These were the same soldiers who had fought through a Korthvi-occupied space station, yet they were now patiently helping Nethwa with his calculations. Dr. Kesitai, called Corporal Lisa Wang, one of the younger Marines. Could you settle an argument for us? Peters here thinks your quantum flowers could be used for faster-than-light communication. Kestai smiled and joined the group. Actually, Corporal Peters might be correct. We've observed entangled quantum states that seem to transcend normal space-time limitations. The discussion that followed was enthusiastic and intelligent. The human soldiers asked thoughtful questions and offered creative suggestions. They approached science with the same intensity they brought to combat, but with curiosity instead of aggression. Later that evening, Kesitai received a personal message from Admiral Morrison. The Admiral's image appeared in her private quarters, looking relaxed and friendly. Dr. Kesitai, Morrison began, I wanted to thank you personally for agreeing to testify before the Council. I know politics isn't your favorite subject. It was the least I could do, Admiral, Kesitai replied. Your people saved our lives and asked for nothing in return. Morrison looked uncomfortable with the praise. We did what anyone should do. The real question is what happens next. The Council will approve the protection force, Kestai said confidently. They have no choice. Too many species have heard our story and realized they could be next. I hope you're right, Morrison replied. But more importantly, I hope we can live up to the trust being placed in us. The next day, the Galactic Council voted overwhelmingly to establish the Human Protection Force. The final vote was 847 in favor, 23 opposed, with 15 abstentions. Within a week, human fleets began deploying to key systems throughout Council space. They came not as conquerors but as guardians, establishing bases that were open to inspection and operating under strict rules of engagement. The Korthvi hegemony, meanwhile, had withdrawn to their core territories after losing 3 fleets to a single human force. Other aggressive species took note and began reconsidering their expansionist policies. Trade routes that had been plagued by pirates for centuries became safe overnight. Research stations in remote systems no longer feared attacks. Refugee ships fleeing war zones knew they could find protection in Council. Space Dr. Kesitai's quantum flower research became the foundation for new communication networks that allowed human fleets to coordinate across vast distances. Her work, which had nearly been perverted into weapons of war, instead became tools of peace and protection. 6 months after sending her desperate distress call, Dr. Kestai attended the dedication ceremony for the new Harmony's Light Research Institute. The station had been expanded into a major facility where scientists from dozens of species worked together on peaceful projects. Admiral Morrison attended the ceremony personally, along with many of the Marines who had participated in the rescue. As she spoke to the assembled crowd, her words were broadcast across the galaxy. Science and knowledge belong to all sentient beings, Morrison said. They should never be corrupted by violence or greed. The human species is honored to protect those who seek understanding over conquest, wisdom over power. After the ceremony, Kesitai found herself alone with Admiral Morrison on the observation deck. The view showed human patrol ships moving among vessels from dozens of other species, all working together in harmony. Admiral, Kesitai said quietly, I have a question I've wanted to ask for months. Of course, Doctor. Why do you do this? Your people could easily conquer the galaxy if you wanted. Instead, you choose to protect species that were strangers to you just months ago. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the stars. Dr. Kesitai, humanity spent millions of years as predators on a deadly world. We learned to hunt, to fight, to survive against impossible odds. But we also learned something else. What was that? We learned that the strongest predators are the ones who protect their pack. Your distress call didn't reach strangers.